Well, welcome everybody to StraightUp Solar's webinar on accelerating the clean energy transition, the one-year anniversary of the Inflation Reduction Act. My name is Eric Schneider. I'm the Director of Business Development and Marketing here at StraightUp Solar, and I'm going to be the facilitator, moderator for today's program. I'm really honored to have two of my esteemed colleagues presenting today on this important topic regarding commercial solar. Shannon Fulton, Vice President of Development, has been with StraightUp Solar since 2013. She leads our business development and marketing efforts and heads our Central Illinois office team. Shannon's been very active on the advocacy side of the Inflation Reduction Act at the federal and at the state level. She serves on the board of the Illinois Solar Energy Association, and she's also been the past president of our trade association here. She is an Illinois State alumnus and has expertise not only in renewable energy, but in geology and geohydrology. Ky Ajayi is our solar access manager, will assist Shannon in the presentation. Ky's role in StraightUp Solar is to provide access to underserved communities in solar, and specifically, he is one of the leading experts in the state on Illinois Solar for All projects. He's led our efforts in that arena, and this year we're expected to do 6 more Illinois Solar for All projects here, and he'll be doing some case studies on specifically Illinois Shines and Illinois Solar for All projects here. So I'm really, we'll hear from Shannon and Ky a little later here, but I want to give you a little background about StraightUp Solar. Our vision is to care for others by creating a path for clean energy and a sustainable economy that honors our value and everyone's healthy, shared future. We were founded by an orthopedic surgeon, Dr. Dane Glick, and this motto of caring for others. He wanted to extend the notion of caring for others beyond his medical practice. He's currently still a practicing orthopedic surgeon here, but the notion of what we can do to care for others in our community through clean energy is what drives him to lead this company at StraightUp Solar. We were founded in 2006. We serve Illinois and Missouri. And Dane, as our founder, installed the first solar system on his house. And everyone thought that was pretty cool. He got a bunch of buddies. They ended up doing solar around his neighborhood. And now 16 years later, the company has done 2,500 installations, over 44 megawatts installed capacity across Illinois and Missouri. We do residential, commercial, industrial, as well as solar energy solutions such as battery storage, smart panels, EV charging stations, and we also do service and maintenance for all our systems here. So again, caring for our community, not at the installation, but after the installation. It's really a lifetime commitment that we give to our customers to making sure that we provide a quality product. We develop, engineer, procure, which means that we're a turnkey installer for projects up to 5 megawatts. Here, we do our asset inspections and operation and maintenance for our commercial product installations. We're also really proud to be an Amicus Solar cooperative member here, which means that even though we're a small company, we have 137 employees, but we're able to group purchase with nationwide providers that allows us to get better pricing for solar panels, racking, inverters, all the balance of system products that are needed for a solar installation here. So we're really proud to be part of that Amicus cooperative here. And probably as importantly, StraightUp Solar is proud to be a certified B Corporation. What that means is that we are balancing the impact of our environment and our community with our profitability. So that kind of triangle of people, planet, and profit is foremost in front of our minds here as we operate as a company here. And every day we strive to make our business the best it can be for people and planet. And we're really proud to be part of only 6,000 corporations all across the world that are certified B corporations here. Some of the more famous ones are like Ben & Jerry's, Patagonia, King Arthur Flour. But for a small company of ours, I'm really proud to be part of a B Corp, making sure that our company is a force for good in the world here. We want to make sure that any interaction we have at StraightUp Solar, that we our customers understand that we are using our clear values, and we expect our customers to hold us to these values in every single interaction, which means putting the community first, leading the solar community, educating, where this webinar comes in handy, advocating for solar policy, also related to this webinar, as many of the incentives came from our advocacy at the federal and state level, respect for each other and the environment, and excellence in all we do. We are recording today's webinar, The webinar will last about 45 minutes. If you have questions, please put the questions in the chat, and then I will summarize them and pass them on to Ky and Shannon at the end. As I said, the webinar is being recorded. Everyone who registered will receive a link to today's presentation, and we'll also post this webinar on the StraightUp Solar YouTube channel. Just want to mention the recording for later viewing will not include the case studies that will be presented later on in the presentation, because the financial data is shown only as an example for today's presentation. I want to tell you that all projects are unique at StraightUp Solar, and your solar project will have pricing customized to your business's energy needs. So we request you contact us, and we'll connect you with a project developer that will talk to you about your specific needs and interests. Today's presentation will focus on commercial solar installations less than 1 megawatt. That is pretty much the bulk of our commercial installations, and definitely the focus of the Inflation Reduction Act to kind of encourage small and medium-sized businesses. But again, we do projects up to 5 megawatts, so I encourage you to contact Ky or Shannon after the call, and we can get you started on kind of those larger projects. But I want to make sure today's webinar is only focused on commercial solar under 1 megawatt AC. We're going to learn about the top commercial benefits that are coming out of the Inflation Reduction Act, including the establishment of the 30% federal tax credit, the adder credits that are part of the investment tax credit. We're going to talk about direct pay and what that means for nonprofits and municipalities, and also the new act expanded funding for the Renewable Energy for America program that's run by the U.S. Department of Agriculture. Shannon will also talk about the state of commercial solar and the IRA impact just in 1 year, what it's done for renewable energy construction all across the country. And then Ky will come on board and talk about specific case studies coming from our Illinois Shines program, which talks about the Illinois renewable energy credits, and then the Illinois Solar for All projects that he's been actively engaged in. So with that overview of our day, I'm going to turn it over to Shannon to start our presentation.
Thanks, Eric. Let's start off with probably the most commonly used and the most historically used tax incentive for solar, and that is the federal investment tax credit. The the IRA increased and extended the ITC. Increased it to 30% and then extended it out to 2035. And when it comes to this tax credit, you know, we're pretty familiar with how that works within the solar industry. But just as a reminder, what's included in the basis for that tax credit is all of the labor, all of the system installation labor, interconnection labor, all of the equipment, the costs for the utility interconnection. That is new. So if the utility requires upgrades in order for a system to be interconnected, those costs can be included in the basis, and electrical service upgrade requirements to accommodate the solar. So there was some nice clarity and improvements provided for what could be included in the basis for the investment tax credit. Can you go back just one, please? A couple of the other important notes related to the investment tax credit are that there's no maximum credit. It requires you to have a tax liability to be able to monetize it, of course, but there's no cap. And there's no requirement to meet the domestic content criteria over time to get the ITC base amounts. And that's different. We'll talk about how that's different with direct pay. But it's something to point out that the domestic content adder is possible, but it's not a requirement for non-direct pay projects. And it's the 30% ITC steps down to 22.5% in 2034, steps down again in 2035, and then zeroes out in 2036 as written currently. Those adder credits, we're going to talk about the energy community credit and just briefly about the domestic content credit. I won't review in this presentation the low income allocation credit, but those are the three adder credits that can be stacked on top of the 30% federal investment tax credit. Starting with the energy community credit, it's a 10% increase. So if you have a project located in what's called an energy community, then you could conceivably monetize 30% federal tax credit plus an additional 10% for acknowledging that the project is located within a quote unquote energy community. There are three types of energy communities. And there's a really great searchable map that is put out by the Department of Energy that you can search any address and find out whether your project or location is within an energy community. But the three different basic types of energy communities that have been defined are brownfield site. So this is, think of it as a site that's contaminated or as a landfill or some type of site that's undergoing either active remediation or has been capped, or some type of contaminated site that's not really developable in any other way because of what's been how the soil and water have been impacted. Then the second type is a metropolitan statistical area or non-MSA, and these areas include specific thresholds for direct employment or local tax revenues related to fossil fuel, coal plant or gas plant processing, and an unemployment rate related to the national average unemployment rate. So there are two triggers or two criteria that determine whether a location is in a metropolitan statistical or non-metropolitan statistical area. And then the third is just by census tract. If the tract where the project is located is within an area where a coal mine was closed, or is in an area directly adjacent to where a coal mine was closed or retired, that qualifies as an energy community as well. And again, that searchable map is a really very useful tool for determining if your project is eligible for the 10% ITC bonus for energy communities. And touching briefly on domestic content, this is an additional 10% ITC bonus. And I believe this will ultimately be a very positive opportunity for U.S. solar production and solar projects. Since the IRA passed, module manufacturers have announced approximately 36 capacity additions. And if everything happens as expected, we will expect to increase from the current domestic production of solar modules at 10.6 gigawatts up to, up to 108.5 gigawatts by 2026. So really positive projections. And we, StraightUp Solar for one, is really looking forward to that capacity coming online. However, currently, there is no major PV system equipment that has enough US-made components, aside from possibly First Solar, to qualify for domestic content as currently prescribed by the IRS rules. So currently, this really isn't being monetized or it's not part of projects at this time. There's a lot of confusion about how the calculation is used to determine percent domestic content. And the Treasury Department is expected to come out with updated guidance by quarter one. So hopefully soon there will be more guidance on how to specifically calculate the necessary percentage of domestic content to qualify for this adder. Currently, we're not aware of any tax equity investors who are including it in their investments at this time. Elective pay, otherwise known as direct pay, is definitely a game changer for nonprofit municipal entities, those tax exempt and governmental entities that are exempt from tax under Title A. So that's any state or local government, Indian tribal government, rural co-ops, and not typical nonprofits. And this is brand new. It has never been offered in the past, and it's essentially provides the ability to or tax exempt entities to monetize the tax credit in a way where the monetization happens through a direct payment, since there is no tax liability to be applied. So currently there is the 30% base credit, tax credit through 2032. Now, I mentioned the domestic content requirement for direct pay projects, and here's where it enters in. So that 30% base credit, and again, we're talking about projects below 1 megawatt AC. It's different for larger projects, slightly different. It involves some other criteria. But for projects 100 kilowatt, less than 100 kilowatts AC, the base credit declines unless it meets the domestic content requirements. And it declines by 10% in tax year 2023, 2024, 15% in tax year 2025, and then goes to 0 if you don't have domestic content criteria, or if you don't meet the domestic content criteria in tax year 2026. So the base credit drops to 28% in general outside of the domestic content requirement in 2033, and then 26% in 2034. So this is just as a reminder, if there is a direct payment, if you have a direct payment that's associated with your project, can you go to the next slide? Sorry, Ky, or Eric. So here's the timeline. And I think this is the part that is a little bit confusing for folks, as to like, how do you apply for the direct payment, and what does the timeline look like? So let's say that a project goes into service, and again, that's the trigger. The project in service date is the trigger for beginning the process for application for the direct payment. So let's say a project goes into service in 2023. That entity, by late 2023 or early 2024, before the tax return is due, the entity must pre-register with the IRS. Now, that pre-registration portal has not been released yet. It's not online yet. They're expecting for that to open by the end of this year. So we'll keep an eye out for that. And then by May 15th, 2024, for this example project, for most tax exempt and governmental entities, you'll want to file May 15th will be the deadline to file the tax return, assuming you don't take an extension. And that's the point at which you will file for the direct payment. And then after the return is processed is when you would receive your payment. So the timeline for receiving this direct payment is very similar to the timeline for claiming the tax credit that entities who have a tax liability would follow. It's just that you would receive an actual direct payment versus a tax credit reduction, or a tax credit to reduce the tax income liability. Okay, next slide. The other thing that is very applicable, especially in our neck of the woods, central to Southern Illinois and into Missouri, is the Renewable Energy for America program, otherwise known as REAP. The IRA increased funding significantly for this program. It brought an additional $1 billion into the REAP program for projects like solar. And it also increased the grant percentage that a project could earn, up to 40% of the total eligible project costs for most projects, and then up to 50% for projects on tribal lands. Now, as a reminder, this is a reimbursement grant, so you have to spend the money to get the reimbursement grant. And eligible applicants include ag producers with at least 50% of their gross income coming from the agricultural operations, small businesses in eligible rural areas, which include populations with 50,000 people or fewer, and also agricultural producers can be located either in rural or non-rural areas, and they would be eligible to apply for these grants. So again, if you're an agricultural producer, you're eligible whether you're in a small rural area or a non-rural area. And there are 4 application windows each year: June, September, December, and March. So let's look at the federal, sort of where we are in the US when it comes to solar installations, and then with a specific focus on the commercial side. So even without the IRA, you know, we've seen solar expand tremendously across the US, with most of that increase in growth happening on a utility scale level. That's what, you know, it's really moving the needle on the utility scale level. There's been a 24% average annual growth rate over the past 10 years across the US. And about 155 gigawatts currently installed, enough to power 27 million homes. That's pretty impressive. And with the Inflation Reduction Act, the expectation is for that projection to increase by 34% compared to pre-IRA installation projections. So from a positive standpoint, the IRA, you know, there's a lot of positive around the IRA. To start with, you know, Illinois already has really strong incentives, you know, compared to other states nationally. And it places those incentives, places Illinois 8th in the entire nation for expected solar growth. So it's pretty remarkable that the state of Illinois' incentives are paired nicely right now with the IRA. What the IRA benefits also do, though, for markets that don't benefit from the same types of incentives that Illinois has right now, it helps to offset that. So a 30% federal tax credit long-term paired with direct pay for, you know, some nonprofits, and the additional REAP benefits helps to elevate the case for solar in states like Missouri with fewer incentives. But nationally, there's a huge wave of optimism that has come in this first year from what we expect the IRA to do with future growth of solar. The long-term policy certainty is something that we haven't had ever in the solar industry, this much of a long-term certainty. It continues to drive expectations for double-digit growth in the solar industry. And the 5-year outlook, it shows commercial solar in particular, which we're talking about today, expected to grow by 8% compared to the previous 5 years. We currently have 12 gigawatts of capacity, of commercial capacity online in the first half of 2023, compared to only 8 in the first half of 2022. So again, we're seeing some natural growth, but also some of those impacts of the positivity surrounding the IRA. The amount of capital seeking high quality solar project investments has definitely increased as well. Some of the things, and this is just a heat map showing what we were talking about earlier on this previous slide, and that is that in particular, Illinois has really strong incentives that pair very nicely with the IRA right now. A lot of commercial solar being installed in Illinois. It financially makes a lot of sense given the incentives and the increasing electricity rates. The things that are moving toward positive are, the IRA was a huge piece of legislation, and it's taking time to roll it out in a clear and concise way. It's been pretty slow and complicated, and we haven't really seen it move the needle much yet. Some of those drag factors that are unrelated to the legislation itself being large and complicated are that we had significant supply chain constraints in 2022, high interest rates currently, and elevated hardware and labor costs. And what's becoming more and more of sort of the primary target issue that we're focusing in on is the interconnection and interconnection queue congestion with the utilities. A lot of solar demand, and the interconnection queue and ability to process those interconnection applications has been a bit limited nationwide, not just in Illinois. But overall, we definitely expect through 2028 and beyond commercial solar installations to increase over time pretty significantly. And with that, I will pass it on to Ky Ajayi.
So prior to the IRA, the only way that nonprofits could get any access to those investment tax credits was through a third-party finance player. So this third party would come in, they would take all of the tax credits, they'd take all the incentives basically, and in return, provide a power purchase agreement or a lease. And for many of our financial partners, they wanted to take advantage of the energy sovereignty adder that exists under Illinois Solar for All. That gives another $10 per rec. So the investor would take the tax credits, the recs, turn over the array in year 7, and all of these incentives would now accrue to the to the finance partner. The benefit to the off-taker is under Solar for All rules, they have to enjoy 65% energy savings from year 1. But let me back up a second for those who may not be familiar with Illinois Solar for All. Under FIJA and then refunded under CJA, Illinois Solar for All is geared towards providing solar in underserved communities. I like to say, as Reverend Pierce often says, those communities that were missed by the information superhighway, we want to make sure they're not missed by the renewable energy revolution. So the idea is to go to distressed communities and find ways to get solar into those communities. And one of those ways is with higher renewable energy credit values, and now with this direct pay option. So with direct pay, what happens is the off-taker, the nonprofit or the municipality, gets all of those incentives and the tax credits. And what happens is you see the cost of an array drop from that 100% down to somewhere between 80 and 100%.
Thank you, Ky. Thank you, Shannon, for that presentation. There's Shannon and Ky's contact information. I also put in the chat how you can reach us to get started on your commercial solar. We do have a couple of questions popping in on the chat in the Q&A, so if we'll get started, and feel free to keep dropping them in the chat as I go along here. The first question was, have you heard if claiming the IRA adders will increase the IRS process time significantly?
I don't know if that will happen. I wouldn't be surprised if the processing time took a little bit longer, given this is sort of the first year that they're doing some of these projects, reviewing some of these projects, but I can't imagine that it would be overly long, the process itself.
I'm a little more optimistic because the criteria to qualify for the adders are fairly clear. You're either in an energy community, for example, or not. So they look at your address, they check on the map, you are in, boom, it gets qualified. The low income, which we're not going to get into, might be a little more difficult. But the energy community in particular, I think, is one, and the direct pay, I think both of those should not significantly increase processing time.
Do I understand correctly that any direct pay project that goes live in 2024 or after is not eligible for the full amount? And I'm going to go back to the timeline.
So, Ross, it is, yeah, so thanks. Can you go back just one more? Yeah, there we go. So it is eligible for the full amount. However, so for in tax year 2024, for example, it would only be eligible for 90% of that 30% ITC if there was not a domestic content requirement met. So you could get the full amount, but you'd have to meet the domestic content requirement in order to get that. And if not, you'd get, 90% of that total 30% amount. Does that make sense? It gets a little cloudy when you talk about percentages of percentages, but.
And Ross, as Shannon pointed out, we're seeing an increase in the amount of domestic content material that's available.
Yeah.
Even today, we can spec stuff with domestic content, but we're still struggling to get the relevant support from manufacturers to say, these panels are 62% domestic content, and these inverters are 59%. So we're hopeful that by the time we get to 2024, we'll be able to spec projects with domestic content so that they can meet the requirements and the full 30% can be achieved.
Yeah, we're hoping, yeah, like we said earlier, we're hoping for more clarity on how to calculate that by Q1.
And then Shannon, is there a transferability aspect of direct pay?
There's not a transferability aspect of direct pay, but there is a transferability aspect of the investment tax credit for for-profit businesses. We didn't include that in something that we were talking about with projects of this size. I think it's not all that common for these smaller commercial projects, but it is also one mechanism for, financing the mostly larger projects than what we're talking about today.
Got it. And we have one final question. Again, keep putting your questions in the chat if we have any more. Does StraightUp Solar help the clients with the REAP process or the application for direct pay?
Yeah, good question. We have grant writing expertise and people that we work with, that we connect our customers to when it comes to the REAP grant applications. And when it comes to assisting people in applying for direct pay, we certainly will share the information that we're aware of that helps people understand the process. But we recommend that you work with your accountant or tax attorney to actually work through the actual details of submitting your information and filling out the appropriate forms and providing the necessary information. Of course, we would provide all of the system information, equipment costs, all of the supporting documentation that you might need.
Great. Well, I'm just going to scan through the slides here. There's more information on the REAP again. I will just scan back to the end of our presentation and make sure everyone has Ky and Shannon's contact information. I want to thank both of you for your time and participating in the webinar and sharing this great information on the Inflation Reduction Act and the 1 year back look on what all the great accomplishments have happened in 1 year. So again, I'm Eric Schneider, StraightUp Solar. I want to thank Ky Ajayi, our Solar Access Manager, and Shannon Fulton, our Vice President of Development and Policy, for joining us today. Thank you, Kai. Thank you, Shannon, for that presentation.